To new beginnings, Kendall announced with a predatory smile, raising her champagne flute toward the pregnant woman across the table. And to those who simply couldn't deliver what was promised. Every head in the exclusive restaurant turned as Autumn Holloway placed one protective hand on her swollen belly, her face calm despite the deliberate cruelty in her husband's mistress's voice. "How interesting," Autumn replied, her voice steady as she reached for the leather portfolio beside her plate. "I was about to propose the same toast." She slid a document across the table. "Congratulations on your celebration, Kendall. Though I believe there's been a misunderstanding about exactly who won the Riverside project contract." As Kendall's perfectly manicured fingers opened the folder, her triumphant smile froze. There, bearing yesterday's date and her lover's signature, was the $500 million contract, awarded to Autumn's firm. "Oh, and one more thing," Autumn added, placing a second document next to the first. "These divorce papers need your signature too, Garrett. Consider it the price of the freedom you've been so desperately chasing with her. The most dangerous moment in any affair isn't the first kiss or the first lie, it's the moment an intelligent woman decides she's done being humiliated." Welcome to Mr. Stevens Stories. Have you ever witnessed someone celebrate a victory they haven't actually won? That delicious moment when arrogance collides with reality? In the world of power and betrayal, the person you should fear most isn't the one who screams and threatens, it's the one who quietly plans while you think you're winning. What would you do if you discovered your spouse's affair? Confront immediately, or orchestrate the perfect moment of reckoning? If you appreciate stories of quiet strength triumphing over flashy arrogance, hit that like button now. And stay with me, because to understand how 3 lives were forever changed over a $500 million contract and a champagne toast, we need to go back to the beginning. 6 months earlier, Garrett and Autumn Holloway appeared to have everything. Their restored Victorian mansion in West Hartford's most prestigious neighborhood gleamed with old-world charm and modern luxury. His family's development company had just posted record profits. Her architectural firm, Horizon Designs, had transformed from a one-woman operation to a respected boutique agency specializing in sustainable urban renewal. After 15 years of marriage and years of fertility struggles, Autumn was finally pregnant. The missing piece of their perfect life had fallen into place. On a crisp autumn evening, Autumn stood in their sunlit kitchen, one hand absently stroking her barely visible baby bump as she reviewed design sketches spread across the marble island. At 42, pregnancy had given her an ethereal glow that softened her typically precise appearance. The sound of Garrett's key in the front door made her look up with a smile. "You're home early," she said, pleasantly surprised as her husband appeared in the kitchen doorway. "I thought you had the investors' dinner tonight." Garrett loosened his tie with a distracted gesture. "Postponed. Anderson came down with something." He barely glanced at the sketches as he poured himself a bourbon. "What's all this?" "Initial concepts for the Riverside project. The RFP finally went public today." Autumn's eyes lit with excitement. "Garrett, it's perfect for Horizon. Community-focused, mixed-use development with an emphasis on sustainability. It's exactly what we've been building toward." Garrett took a long swallow of his drink. "That's a massive project, Autumn. $500 million. Every major firm in the Northeast will be competing." "I know." She met his gaze directly. "And we'll submit the best design. This could establish Horizon nationally. Or overextend you, right when the baby's due." Garrett's voice held an edge that made Autumn pause. "Maybe this isn't the right timing. The baby's not due for 6 months. The design submission is in 3. She studied him, noting the tension in his shoulders, the way he avoided her eyes. "What's really bothering you?" Garrett sighed, setting down his glass. "Nothing. Just tired. The Westbrook acquisition is taking more work than anticipated." He glanced at his watch. "I should review some documents before tomorrow's meeting." "Garrett." Autumn's voice stopped him at the doorway. "We haven't talked about the nursery colors yet. I was thinking a soft green. "Whatever you think is best," he interrupted. "You're the designer." As he disappeared upstairs to his home office, Autumn felt the first tremor of unease. This distance had been growing since they'd confirmed the pregnancy. She'd attributed it to normal anxiety about becoming a father, but tonight something felt different. More pronounced. More deliberate. She couldn't know that upstairs, Garrett was staring at his phone, at a text message that read, "*Miss you already. Dinner was too short. Same time tomorrow." Beside it was a photo of a woman with dark hair and a crimson smile, her eyes promising things his pregnant wife no longer occupied his thoughts with. Garrett's journey toward betrayal hadn't begun with intention. The charity gala for Hartford Children's Hospital should have been routine, another evening of networking, another appearance as the face of Holloway development. But Autumn had been suffering from severe morning sickness, unable to attend, and Garrett found himself alone at the bar when a woman in a striking emerald dress approached. "Garrett Holloway," she said, extending her hand. "I've been hoping to meet you. Kendall Mercer, principal architect at Vanguard Designs." Her handshake was firm, her smile confident without being aggressive. At 35, Kendall Mercer had already made a name for herself with sleek, dramatic buildings that looked more like sculptures than functional spaces. Critics called her work self-indulgent, admirers called it visionary. "The Lakeside Tower was your design, wasn't it?" Garrett asked, recognizing her name. "Impressive structure." "Thank you." Her smile deepened. "Though I understand your wife might disagree. I've read her criticisms of prioritizing form over community integration." "Autumn has strong opinions about architecture," Garrett replied, surprised that this woman knew of the professional tension between their firms. "As do I." Kendall's eyes locked with his. "That's what makes this business interesting, the passion. The competition." She took a sip of her champagne. "I hear Holloway Development might be overseeing the Riverside project." "It's still in early discussions." Garrett signaled for another bourbon. "But yes, we're likely to be the primary developer." "Then we should definitely talk." Kendall's business card appeared between two manicured fingers. "I have some concepts that might interest you." What began as professional networking evolved with alarming speed. Coffee to discuss design philosophy became dinner to explore potential collaborations. Dinner became drinks that stretched late into the evening. And drinks, eventually, led to Kendall's downtown loft, with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city Garrett's family had helped build. With Kendall, Garrett felt none of the pressure that had been mounting at home. No nursery colors to choose, no discussions of parenting philosophies, no subtle reminders of his own father's catastrophic failures as a parent. With Kendall, he could be the confident businessman, the powerful developer, not the terrified almost father who woke in cold sweats imagining himself repeating his father's emotional abandonment. When Autumn noticed his increasing absences, his distraction, his emotional withdrawal, Garrett offered the explanation she was primed to accept. "I just need time to process everything," he told her one night, avoiding her concerned gaze. "The pregnancy, the company expansion, it's a lot of change at once." Autumn, attributing his distance to the same adjustment she was making to impending parenthood, gave him the space he claimed to need. After all, they'd been trying for a baby for years. It was natural to feel overwhelmed now that it was finally happening. They would find their footing together, as they always had. What she couldn't see was that with each passing week, Garrett was constructing an elaborate psychological escape hatch, and Kendall Mercer was holding it open for him. Have you ever competed against someone with unfair advantages? Someone who was willing to use any means to win? Share your experience in the comments below. Sometimes life's greatest tests come disguised as unfair competitions. The Riverside project wasn't just another development. For Hartford, it represented urban renewal on a scale the city had never attempted, 30 acres of former industrial land transformed into a mixed-use community with affordable housing, retail spaces, offices, and extensive green areas. For architects, it was the commission of a decade. For Autumn Holloway, it became something far more personal. The community integration aspects will be essential, Autumn explained to her small team, gesturing to the site map spread across their conference table. We need to design spaces that don't just look good in architectural magazines, but actually serve the people who live and work there. Vanguard will go flashy, noted Zoe, her senior associate. Kendall Mercer never met a dramatic gesture she didn't like. Autumn smiled tightly. We're not designing against Vanguard. We're designing for Hartford. What she didn't say was that Kendall Mercer had become a more immediate threat than anyone at Horizon Designs could imagine. 3 days earlier, Autumn had discovered the truth in the most mundane way possible. She had arrived early for her prenatal appointment, the elevator doors opening on the 12th floor of the Medical Arts building where Garrett kept a secondary office for late-night work. As she stepped out, intending to surprise him with coffee before her appointment, she saw them in the hallway, Garrett and Kendall Mercer, his hand possessively at the small of her back as they whispered intimately. The casual familiarity between them made it instantly clear that this was no professional relationship. Autumn had retreated to the stairwell, her world imploding around her. The coffee cup trembled in her hand, hot liquid sloshing over the rim as she processed what she'd seen. The missed dinners. The late nights. The emotional distance. All explained in a single, devastating moment. That night, she'd sat in her car outside their home for nearly an hour, rehearsing what she would say, how she would confront him. But when she finally entered the house and saw Garrett working at his desk, something stopped her. Not fear or weakness, but a sudden, clear-eyed calculation. "How was your day?" he'd asked absently, barely looking up. "Interesting," she'd replied, her voice remarkably steady. "I've made some decisions about the Riverside project submission." In that moment, a plan began to form, not born from vindictiveness, but from a determination to understand exactly who her husband had become before deciding their future. And to ensure that whatever happened, her professional achievement wouldn't be collateral damage in their personal collapse. Over the next 3 weeks, as her pregnancy advanced and her husband continued his deception, Autumn poured herself into the Riverside design with a focus that bordered on obsession. Her team noticed her intensity but attributed it to the project's importance. Affordable housing units that don't look affordable, she instructed during a design review. Green spaces that connect rather than separate different income areas. A childcare facility incorporated into the office complex so parents can work and still be close to their children. Every element reflected her values: community, accessibility, sustainability. But underneath the professional execution was a deeper message, one that would eventually be clear to exactly 2 people: the architecture wasn't just for Hartford. It was a statement about what mattered, what endured, what could be built to last. Meanwhile, across town, Kendall Mercer saw the Riverside project as her opportunity to establish dominance over Horizon Designs. Securing the contract would advance her career and prove her superiority over the woman whose husband she'd taken. "Garrett, darling, the view corridors in my design will make the entire complex feel like a resort," she explained one evening in her sleek downtown apartment. "The central tower will be visible from anywhere in the city, a new landmark for Hartford." "It's certainly dramatic," Garrett agreed, studying the renderings. "The board will be impressed. They should be. I've designed it specifically to appeal to them." She traced a finger down his arm. "With your support, this contract is practically guaranteed." Kendall didn't know that Holloway Development had established a blind review process for the Riverside submissions. A decision the board had insisted on after questions arose about potential conflicts of interest in previous projects. All identifying information would be removed from proposals before evaluation. It was a system Garrett had initially fought against but now secretly appreciated, as it offered him a way to appear supportive of Kendall while maintaining plausible deniability if her design wasn't selected. What neither Kendall nor Garrett realized was that the anonymous submission process would become the perfect mechanism for Autumn's quiet reckoning. The most powerful revenge isn't planned in anger, but in cold, clear calculation. If you're enjoying this story of quiet strength, Hit the like button now and subscribe for more narratives that reveal the deeper truths about human relationships. The committee's selection of Horizon's design for the Riverside project was unanimous. Even with identifying information removed, the superior functionality, sustainability features, and community integration of Autumn's design stood out from the competition. Garrett received the news with mixed emotions: pride in his wife's achievement, anxiety about Kendall's reaction, and a growing awareness that he'd severely underestimated the woman he'd married. That evening, as Garrett prepared to break the news to Kendall, his phone rang with a call from Autumn. "I'd like to schedule a dinner meeting to sign the Riverside contract," she said, her voice professional. "Maison Laurent, tomorrow evening at 7. Clayton will bring the paperwork." "Of course," Garrett replied, surprised by the formality. "Just the three of us?" "Actually," Autumn said, "I think we should include Kendall Mercer." Garrett nearly dropped the phone. "Kendall? Why would?" "Professional courtesy," Autumn interrupted. "She was a finalist. It's important to maintain good relationships in the industry." Before Garrett could formulate a response, Autumn continued, "I've already spoken with her. She's agreed to attend." As the line went dead, Garrett felt the first real stirring of fear. In 15 years of marriage, he had never known Autumn to be vindictive or confrontational. This dinner invitation seemed wildly out of character, unless she knew something. The call to Kendall had been even more precisely calculated. Autumn had contacted her directly at her firm, maintaining a tone of professional respect. "Ms. Mercer, this is Autumn Holloway. I'm calling to invite you to a dinner meeting regarding the Riverside project. Has a decision been made?" Kendall had asked, poorly disguising her eagerness. "Yes," Autumn confirmed. "The developer would like to discuss the outcome with the finalists. Tomorrow evening, Maison Laurent at 7. "I'll be there," Kendall had replied confidently. "Though I already have a celebration planned for afterward." "How appropriate," Autumn had said. "I look forward to it." Clayton Bennett, Holloway Development's lead counsel, was the only person who knew the full extent of Autumn's plan. As a longtime family friend, he had been devastated to learn of Garrett's infidelity but agreed to assist Autumn in orchestrating what she called her moment of clarity. "Are you certain about this approach?" he'd asked her, concerned. "It could get messy, very publicly." "I'm not interested in public drama," Autumn had explained. "I need to understand what I'm dealing with before this child arrives. I need to know if Garrett is running away from something or towards something." The evening of the dinner, Autumn spent extra time preparing. Her 6 months pregnant silhouette was draped in a midnight blue dress that managed to look both professional and undeniably feminine. She applied her makeup with precision, arranged her honey blonde hair in a simple updo, and lastly, removed her wedding ring, placing it in the jewelry box where it would remain. What would you have done in Autumn's position? Would you have confronted your spouse immediately, or created a moment of reckoning like she did? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The finest restaurants in downtown Hartford were accustomed to hosting power players from the city's financial and architectural firms, but tonight's gathering at Maison Laurent drew particular attention. Garrett Holloway rarely made public appearances with both his wife and his mistress, at least not intentionally. Kendall arrived first, her crimson dress a calculated choice that showcased both her confidence and her curves. When Autumn entered a few minutes later, the contrast between the two women was immediately apparent. Where Kendall projected a flashy, aggressive sexuality, Autumn radiated a quiet dignity that drew genuine respect rather than mere attention. Garrett and Clayton arrived together, the attorney's discomfort evident as he noted the seating arrangement, Autumn and Garrett on one side of the table, Kendall and himself on the other. It positioned Autumn directly across from Kendall, forcing direct engagement between the two women. "Good evening, everyone," Autumn said graciously, settling into her chair. "Thank you for joining us." Kendall's smile was predatory as she took in Autumn's pregnant form. "I wouldn't miss it. I've been looking forward to discussing the Riverside project with all the key players." "Darling, you've barely touched your appetizer," Garrett murmured to Autumn after the first course arrived, his voice low with practiced concern that couldn't mask his anxiety. Autumn looked at her husband with eyes that had once held boundless admiration but now contained something far more complex. "I'm preserving my appetite," she replied, her voice carrying just enough edge that Garrett understood the double meaning. She knew. Perhaps not everything, but enough. "The riverside designs are truly revolutionary," Clayton said, attempting to steer the conversation toward safer waters. "Autumn, your firm's vision for sustainable community spaces integrated with luxury living is unlike anything Hartford has seen." Kendall's perfectly sculpted eyebrows arched. "Her firm? I thought Holloway Development was considering several proposals." She turned to Garrett, her smile tightening. "You never mentioned your wife was competing for the contract." Garrett took a long swallow of his bourbon. Horizon Design submitted anonymously through the blind review process. The committee made their selection yesterday. "Anonymous submissions," Kendall repeated, her voice dangerously soft. "How convenient." "The committee was particularly impressed with the community integration aspects," Clayton continued, desperately maintaining the professional pretense of their gathering. "Affordable housing units that don't look affordable, the shared green spaces, the childcare facility incorporated into the office complex." "Childcare facilities," Kendall interrupted with a pointed look at Autumn's stomach. "How appropriate. Though I've always believed that mixing family obligations with professional ambition inevitably compromises both. Some people simply aren't designed for divided attention." Autumn set down her water glass with deliberate calm. "Is that so? I've found that understanding the needs of families makes for more thoughtful architectural design. Buildings should serve people, not merely impress them." The critique of Kendall's notoriously flashy but impractical designs hung in the air between them. "Well, not everyone prioritizes the domestic sphere," Kendall replied, her hand drifting to rest on Garrett's forearm. "Some of us prefer to excel in more challenging arenas." Garrett stiffened but didn't remove her hand. His gaze darted between the two women, seeing for the first time the stark contrast between them. Autumn's quiet strength versus Kendall's brittle ambition. One built to endure, the other designed merely to dazzle. "Challenging is certainly one word for it," Autumn said softly. "Though I prefer meaningful myself. The best chess players don't win by moving quickly, they win by seeing 5 moves ahead. In high-stakes confrontations, patience isn't just a virtue, it's a weapon." Kendall's smile hardened as she raised her glass again. "To meaningful relationships, then. The ones that truly satisfy all our needs." As she took a deliberate sip, maintaining direct eye contact with Autumn, Clayton choked slightly on his wine. Garrett felt sweat beading at his temples despite the restaurant's perfect climate control. The waiter arrived with their entrees, providing momentary relief from the tension. As he served each dish with practiced elegance, Garrett noticed Autumn hadn't ordered her usual salmon. Instead, she'd selected the most expensive item on the menu, a decision so unlike her typical understated choices that it further unsettled him. "I hope you don't mind," she said, noticing his observation. "I thought, why not indulge? After all, Holloway Development is paying, and apparently, the company budget stretches to cover all sorts of extracurricular activities." Clayton suddenly became intensely interested in his steak, while Kendall's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Speaking of the Riverside project," Autumn continued smoothly, "I should mention that our team has already begun preliminary work. We've scheduled community feedback sessions for next week." "That's rather presumptuous," Kendall said, her voice tight. "The contract hasn't been officially signed." "Actually," Clayton interjected, pulling a document from his briefcase, "I have the paperwork right here. Garrett asked me to bring it tonight for final signatures." Kendall's composure finally fractured. "You can't be serious." "Garrett, we discussed this project extensively. My firm has spent months developing concepts based on your specific feedback." "Feedback he wasn't authorized to provide," Clayton said quietly. The board established a blind review process precisely to avoid any appearance of impropriety. Impropriety, Kendall repeated, the word hanging in the air like an accusation. Garrett finally found his voice. Kendall, your firm's submission was impressive, but the committee felt Horizon's proposal better aligned with the project's community objectives. The committee, she said flatly. Or your wife? Does it matter? Autumn asked, meeting Kendall's gaze directly. The better design won. The fact that it came from my firm is, unfortunate timing for you, I suppose. The calculated understatement made Kendall flinch more than any direct attack could have. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across her perfect features as she began to understand that she might have miscalculated. Garrett, she said, lowering her voice to the intimate tone that had worked so effectively in private, perhaps we should discuss this later. There are factors at play here beyond mere design considerations. I believe a toast is in order, Kendall announced, rising from her chair with champagne flute in hand. Her crimson dress caught the light as she stood, drawing every eye in the exclusive dining room. To new beginnings. And to those who simply couldn't deliver what was promised. The calculated cruelty in her voice made Garrett's stomach clench. He watched helplessly as his pregnant wife's face drained of color, one protective hand moving instinctively to her swollen belly. If you're referring to your affair with my husband, Autumn said with remarkable steadiness, I'm already aware. Have been for 3 weeks. In fact, that's precisely why I suggested this dinner. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the ambient restaurant noise seemed to recede as Kendall's face went first pale, then flushed with humiliation. Garrett looked as though he might be ill. You knew, he finally managed. Of course I knew, Autumn replied. What I didn't know was whether you'd choose your family or your escape fantasy when the moment of truth arrived. She placed her hand on the contract papers Clayton had set on the table. This was your test, Garrett. Not whether you'd give me the contract, the designs earned that on merit alone, but whether you'd have the courage to end things with Kendall before she discovered she'd lost. Kendall's gaze darted between them, her professional humiliation now compounded by the realization that she'd been performing for an audience already aware of the script. This is absurd, she hissed, gathering her purse. You orchestrated this entire charade to what, punish us? Prove some point. Not to punish, Autumn corrected her. To decide. I needed to understand what I was dealing with before this child arrives. She looked at Garrett, her expression softening slightly. I needed to know if you were running away or running toward something. Garrett felt exposed in a way he never had before, not in the heat of his affair, not in his most intimate moments with either woman. Autumn had seen through his desperate escape attempt to the fear beneath, and instead of using it against him, she'd created this moment of clarity. I'm not my father, he said quietly, the words emerging unbidden. Autumn's eyes filled with understanding. No. You're not. But you need to decide who you are. Kendall stood abruptly. This is all very touching, but I refuse to be used as a prop in your marital drama. Garrett, when you've finished with this pathetic reconciliation attempt, you know where to find me. As she turned to leave, Autumn spoke once more. Kendall, before you go, the community childcare center in the Riverside project? I've decided to name it after my child. The child that Garrett and I created. The Autumn Bailey Center has a nice ring to it, don't you think? My maiden name seems more appropriate now. Kendall's perfectly composed facade finally shattered completely. Without another word, she stalked out of the restaurant, the eyes of every diner following her exit. The most painful consequence isn't losing what you have, it's realizing what you could have had. If this story of dignity and strength resonates with you, subscribe now for more powerful narratives about life's most meaningful lessons. In her wake, Garrett found himself facing the woman who had seen through his weakness yet offered him no easy redemption. Autumn, please, he began, reaching across the table. She withdrew her hand. No, Garrett. Don't mistake my calm for forgiveness. But the contract, you said this was a test. It was. And you failed. Autumn picked up her purse. You sat here while she insulted me, the mother of your child, and did nothing. You didn't end the affair, it ended because I exposed it. That's not choosing your family. That's being caught. Clayton discreetly excused himself, leaving the couple alone with the weight of all that had been revealed. I've been terrified, Garrett admitted. Not of being a father, exactly, but of being my father. Of continuing the cycle. And instead of talking to me, your wife, your partner, you betrayed me. Autumn's voice remained steady. You had options, Garrett. Therapy. Honesty. Instead, you chose cowardice. Please, he whispered, we can fix this. Autumn stood. No, we can't. This dinner wasn't about saving our marriage. It was about showing you exactly what you're losing. The contract is signed. My firm will build the Riverside project. I'll raise our child. And you'll watch from a distance as I create the life you could have been part of. She placed divorce papers on the table beside the contract. These are waiting for your signature too. Consider it the price of your freedom. As she turned to leave, Garrett felt his world collapse entirely. Not just his marriage, but the future he hadn't realized he wanted until it was gone. What will I tell my child, he asked, his voice breaking. Autumn paused. That their mother was strong enough to demand respect. That buildings, like relationships, need solid foundations to stand. And that some things, once broken, can't be fixed, they can only be rebuilt entirely. As she walked away, Garrett understood with perfect clarity that while he'd been fleeing the specter of his father's failures, he had created an entirely new kind of failure that was uniquely his own. And unlike buildings, some demolitions leave nothing but empty space where something beautiful once stood. Sometimes losing someone who doesn't value you is the beginning of finding your true worth. True strength isn't measured in moments of power, but in moments of profound loss. 3 months later, Autumn Bailey stood on the construction site of the Riverside project, her hand resting on her now full belly as the groundbreaking ceremony concluded. Her firm had expanded, hiring 3 new architects to handle the influx of clients that followed the publicity surrounding the project. The architectural world loved an underdog story, and Autumn's triumph over both professional and personal adversity had made her a minor celebrity in design circles. Ms. Bailey, your vision for this project has redefined what urban renewal can look like in Hartford, the mayor said as cameras flashed. The community integration aspects are particularly impressive. Communities thrive when design considers the whole person, Autumn replied, her voice carrying across the assembled crowd. We're building spaces where families can live, work, and grow together. Where single parents have support. Where no one feels isolated in their struggles. She didn't mention that her own experience had deeply informed these priorities. That her understanding of isolation within a marriage had shaped her commitment to creating connected spaces. That her child would grow up in a home without their father, but in a community designed to support alternative family structures. From across the site, Garrett watched her, the divorce papers long since signed. His affair with Kendall had ended that night at the restaurant. Her humiliation complete when she discovered how thoroughly she'd been outmaneuvered by the pregnant woman she'd tried to belittle. Kendall's firm had suffered professionally as well, losing 2 major contracts after word spread about her unprofessional behavior at Maison Laurent. Now, as he observed the quiet confidence with which Autumn directed her team, accepting congratulations from city officials and community leaders, Garrett finally understood what he had truly lost. Not just a wife or the mother of his child, but a woman of remarkable strength and grace who had offered him partnership rather than competition, substance rather than escape. The groundbreaking ceremony concluded with Autumn ceremonially shoveling the first scoop of earth where the childcare center would stand, the Autumn Bailey Center, designed specifically for working parents who wanted quality care near their workplaces. As the crowd dispersed, Garrett approached her cautiously. The designs look even better executed than they did on paper, he said, maintaining a professional distance. Autumn regarded him with composed neutrality. Thank you. The team has worked hard to ensure the implementation matches the vision. An awkward silence fell between them, filled with all they once shared and all they'd lost. "How are you feeling?" he finally asked, glancing at her belly. "Well. The doctor says everything is progressing normally." She met his gaze directly. "I've decided not to learn the gender. I want to be surprised." "Autumn, he began, but she shook her head slightly. "We've covered everything in the divorce agreement, Garrett. Your parental rights, visitation schedule, financial support. There's nothing more to discuss until after the birth." "I know. I just wanted to say that your work here is extraordinary. You deserve this project. And," his voice caught, "you deserved better than what I gave you." For the first time since that night at the restaurant, Autumn's expression softened slightly. "Yes, I did. But I've built something better from the ruins. That's what good architects do." As she turned to join her colleagues, Garrett remained rooted in place, watching the woman who had rebuilt her life without him. In the months and years to come, he would watch from the periphery of his child's life as Autumn built not just a revolutionary urban development, but a life of purpose and meaning that excluded him from its inner circle. The Autumn Bailey Center would open to acclaim, providing working parents with quality childcare while Autumn herself demonstrated that professional ambition and motherhood could coexist beautifully in the hands of someone strong enough to balance both. Her firm would grow, her reputation would solidify, and the broken heart she had carefully mended would eventually open to new possibilities, though never again to him. And Garrett would learn that the most painful consequence of running from your fears is discovering, too late, that you've run directly into the outcome you most dreaded, becoming a father who, like his own, was present only in name and financial support, never in the moments that truly mattered. 6 years later, Garrett sat in his car outside the Autumn Bailey Center, watching as a kindergarten class played in the innovative playground his ex-wife had designed. Among them was a child with his eyes and Autumn's determined chin, a child who called another man Dad, the architect Autumn had married 3 years after their divorce. As he watched his biological child laughing with friends, protected by the structures Autumn had created both literally and figuratively, Garrett finally understood the full measure of what his cowardice had cost him. Not just a marriage, but a family. Not just a wife, but a partner in creating something lasting. The Riverside Project had transformed Hartford, just as Autumn had promised it would. And in its shadow, Garrett Holloway had become exactly what he'd feared, a man who had prioritized escape over responsibility, and who now lived with the empty legacy of that choice. If this story touched you, please share it with someone who needs to be reminded of their own quiet strength. And remember to like and subscribe to Mr. Stephen's Stories for more powerful narratives about choices that shape our lives. Sometimes the most important lessons come from watching others' mistakes, so we don't have to make them ourselves.